to deal with this problem. I am glad that in this administration we have increased the amount of money for handling the problem of dangerous drugs sevenfold. It will be $600 million this year. More money will be needed in the future. I want to say, however, that despite our budget problems, to the extent money can help in meeting the problem of dangerous drugs, it will be available. This is one area where we cannot have budget cuts, because we must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
There's a war going on outside no one is safe from. Public Safety Canada is responsible for policy development and advice to the Minister on matters of national security. National security is defined as the concern of the state and the planned course of action that the administration has in place to deal with the public safety issue. So who better to talk to than the people put in place to protect and serve us?
So the people put in place to serve and protect us are the police officers. So I just set up an anonymous interview behind closed doors with one of the officers that are in the front line battling the war on drugs. Let's go talk to him. So thanks again for sitting down with me. And just a few questions about the war on drugs. What is the main objective of the war on drugs?
The main objective of the war on drugs is basically to get the drugs off the street and clean up our streets and make our cities safer. There's many aspects and many people that are involved in fighting the war on drugs, like a lot of social groups that drive around or go into different neighborhoods trying to deal with people who are suffering from addiction problems. And there's our role of police, which is to stop the distribution of drugs by putting away the drug dealers and the ones who are basically providing the drugs to the general public. So from our perspective, basically make our cities safer, make them safer for our children, because a lot of needles do end up in parks and in neighborhoods that kids are in on a regular basis.
Okay. So why are drugs a national security concern for the state?
With drugs, you got a lot of import and export going on across all kinds of borders, across Canada and across into the States and coming up from Mexico or wherever else you might want to get these drugs from, to get different quality, different types of drugs. When you've got drugs like that, things that are contraband substances that are crossing borders, it brings a lot of illegal things with it, like guns and smuggling of different items as well. But once you've got, and also basically reduces the security of our borders, right? Because a lot of efforts are focused on dealing with the drugs and trying to stop the drug smugglers, and a lot of money spent there as well.
So who are the main threat to the public safety?
There's several threats to public safety and different kinds of threats. As far as the actual drugs are concerned, you've got the drug dealers bringing in the drugs into the city, into the community. With that comes a lot of violence, and there's a lot of collateral damage that happens with violence that's being directed into random areas. Right? It could be, you never know when it's going to be in your community and something violent might happen. Then you've got the people who have drug addiction issues. I personally have dealt with several crackheads, people who are addicted to crack or other drugs, that go through over $1,000 of products a day in terms of breaking into houses, taking whatever you might have in your house. Someone might come into your house not because he wants to rob you, because he needs that money to go get something to get high. So they'll come in the day, at night, while you're sleeping, while you're home, while you're not. That's a huge threat to society. And with that happening, our homes aren't as safe based on what drugs may be in our area.
So, in a nutshell, what is the current plan to deal with the threats of drugs?
There's the policing aspect in terms of getting the drug dealers off the street and getting the drugs off the street. Then there's the shelters that we have in the city that cater to people who have addiction problems. There's a lot of addiction counseling programs that people can go to and that are readily available to them whenever they want to take the time to try and address their issues. There's also different programs that actually go door to door, that drive around in those areas and try to approach them if they don't, if the people who are suffering from addiction issues aren't as willing to go seek those out. People who run those programs are willing to go find the ones who are addicted to drugs and try to help them out that way.
So, is the war on drugs an effective program?
As far as getting the drugs off the street, drugs will always be there. They're never going to be completely gone. At least I don't believe they will. All we can do is try to get them off as much as we can. Because if we ever stop the war on drugs, our city will become oversaturated with drugs and the issues will just run down our city completely. So we have to keep on trying to make sure we don't get to a point where we're completely overrun by drugs and substance abuse and drug dealers and violence. Without the efforts to stop that, we'll lose control of our cities.
So, any last words about the war on drugs?
Yeah, I think the war on drugs is something that we all have to commit to, right? Without help from the general public, as far as tips, calling Crime Stoppers, it's going to be tough to stop. You know, it's much easier if everybody's looking out their windows, because people that live in the communities see a lot more than the police will see, because they live there. So if everybody takes an initiative and calls Crime Stoppers if they see something that looks suspicious, we check it out and it's nothing, that's fine. Just let us know. You know, there's a lot of, even if you think you live in a neighborhood that's safe or doesn't have drug activity, well, there's a lot of meth labs that are set up in these neighborhoods. If you're going to set up a meth lab, where do you set it up? You set it up in an area that's, you know, not going to be suspicious, right? But a lot of nice neighborhoods, say in Barnhaven or Orleans, might have a house there that's, you know, a place where somebody manufactures whatever type of drugs they're looking to manufacture. And without the help from the general public, it makes things a lot more difficult. Like, again, I was saying earlier, if you notice your neighbors, you know, in the winter, everybody else has snow around their house and one house doesn't, that's a clue that maybe there's a lot of heat coming out of that house. A lot of heat might be growing a lot of either marijuana or maybe even meth lab. But the main thing I'm saying is for everybody in the public, everybody involved in this city, everybody who cares about this city, take the time to actually be aware of what's happening around them. Okay, so remember, drugs are bad, stay in school.
Thanks a lot for your time.
Where have I heard that before? I think it's about time we took a look at the ideologies on the war on drugs. In particular, the rhetoric come from the ideological hegemony surrounding the war on drugs.
When I grow up, I want to be a track star.
No one ever says, I want to be a junkie when I grow up.
I want to be a ballerina.
Yet thousands of kids let getting high make a mess of their lives.
I want to be a nurse.
Don't let drugs get in the way of your dreams.
What's this? A joint?
It's stimulating, mind expanding, safer to use than alcohol. It's the in thing, the hula hoop of the jet generation, and as much a part of growing up as smoking corn silk behind the back fence. Such are the myths concerning marijuana.
Can I take your order?
Man, I don't have any money.
Ideology in this sense refers to the social organization of knowledge about drugs.
McGruff here with Regina to say users are losers.
You know it's okay to say no. I'm telling you it's true. Learning when to say no.
Hey, no.
That's what you need to do. Learning how to say no.
Say no.
Can make a winner of you. 'Cause users are losers and losers are users. Don't use drugs. Don't use drugs.
Hey, you ever thought about taking drugs?
I don't know. Well, I never really thought about it.
Think hard. The first hit's free, but you find me when you need more. The choice is yours.
What do you think? No, this drug's not worth the time.
A message from Concerned Children's Advertisers.
Yo, Drew, I got that stuff I was telling you about.
No!
It's yours?
No,
Mother said she found it in your closet.
I don't know. One of the guys must
have what?
Look, Dad, it's
Where
not...
did you get it?
Dad,
Answer me. Who taught you how to do this stuff?
You, all right? I learned it by watching you.
Parents who use drugs have children who use drugs.
All right, California.
Ideological hegemony is a series of beliefs that become normative and cultural, that everyone holds and no one really questions, except a select few.
Well, I have something here that could probably help you out with that.
What do you think about drugs?
So drugs in general, it's a personal choice. However, I think there's a role for society to control drugs which could be considered to be dangerously addictive, because there's a societal detriment to having those around.
So what do you think about the drug users?
So there's a huge range of things there, because that's a broad sweeping generalization. There's a number of people who are there because of either the circumstances of society or where they've ended up. And then there's also a huge swath of people that use drugs in a recreational way, and those are two categories that are entirely separate.
Thanks. What do you think about drugs?
Yeah, I mean, I think drugs, you know, it ruins a lot of people's lives because they get addicted, and you know, they get so addicted that they're forced to do horrible things in order to try to get the money to pay for more drugs, and it funnels underground crime, and you know, leads to all sorts of not so nice things. So yeah, generally that's it.
So what about drug users?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, it's a tough one. Yeah, obviously it's a tough one because, you know, you don't want to force somebody off the street necessarily, but I mean, certainly I think, you know, we need to have clinics available so that these people can get help.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your time.
Generally, I feel that as long as, you know, it's not taking over someone's life, then, you know, power to them. I guess, you know, weed is, I would probably say that's probably, you know, the safest of the drugs, and I don't really see that being a problem when it comes to more intense drugs. I would say the laws probably make sense. Yeah.
So what about the drug users? How do you feel about drug users in terms of their effect on society?
Their effect on society? I guess when you think about the majority of drug users, it usually leads to, you know, homelessness or other types of issues of that sort. So maybe just just ensuring that it's done safely would be the best way to address that. Their effect on society in general. I think it's more that society needs to be more understanding of why people end up in those positions rather than the other way around. And we shouldn't look at it as their effect on society, but society's effect on the reason people decide to turn to drugs.
It's clear to see that ideological hegemony is promoted. Then it becomes part of the cultural thinking, part of the landscape.
So, what do you think about drugs?
Ooh, I think it's a terrible thing, eh? If people start taking drugs, they'll be doing terrible things, so especially young kids like you guys, So it's good that you're learning and doing something with it, But no, it's definitely a negative thing. Drugs are terrible.
So, what about drug users? How should they be treated?
Oh, now you're putting me on the spot, eh? Because I was once a drug user, So what do I think about myself? I don't know if I'm ready to reflect on myself. You're asking questions, eh? I think it depends. Do you deliberately do it? Do you do it, and then do you feel bad about it? Do you try to stop but it never works? Are you an addict? It depends, But you're a pretty good guy, Yeah, that's it. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I'm not at that stage in my life,
So, what type of treatment, what type of method should we use for the drug user? Should we use a punitive method or a treatment method? Or
I don't know. Hell, I haven't stopped taking drugs myself, so I wouldn't be able to say really. But you can just flush it through, give him as many drugs as he wants, and then if he wakes up, he'll know to stop. But or else, you can put him in withdrawal, and it'll just could be another cycle. So I can't say. I'm just
I appreciate your honesty. You've been great. Thanks a lot for your time.
Good luck with your documentary.
Thank you.
This means that ideological hegemony will change. It is not a permanent feature in the cultural landscape. It comes to power, then loses power, and for good reasons. But it has to be opposed in order to lose power. Let's look at opposing forces.
So, what are the main objectives of the war on drugs?
Well, I would argue that the war on drugs is mainly surrounded to try to uphold this moral righteousness of the white, middle, and upper class against kind of othering the folks of color and especially Latino and black folks in the States, and trying to criminalize and moralize this other.
In terms of the drug war and its prohibitive policies, do you think the war on drugs is working?
No, I mean, even if you look at the United States, first of all, the war on drugs narrative never really took hold in Canada. It's the same way that it did in the United States. The Canadian context is slightly different. It is very different than the American context of war on drugs, and no one really even uses that language in Canada anymore.
So, do you think the war on drugs is working?
No, absolutely not. It's a failed policy and program in its essence, in that drug use has continued to stay approximately the same, but so-called enforcement costs have skyrocketed. However, you could also argue that it has worked in that it keeps this moral righteousness of the white middle and upper class, and keeps that contained, and their savior is police forces and other sort of arms of the state. So it upholds that aspect if you look at it from that point of view.
So, what has been the effects on students of having 35 years of this drug policy?
Well, I don't know what this had effects on individual students. I'm sure there's tons of it, but I would also argue that by and large so-called narrative of war on drugs. So I don't necessarily wouldn't lump students into a category of being necessarily overly oppressed by the war on drugs.
So why would such a failed system remain in place for so long?
Police forces and border security and these types of enforcement agencies are incredibly powerful and are agents of state violence and state power. They're the ones who benefit from the so-called war on drugs, and they're going to make sure that stays to the best of their ability, that those powers stay in their hands.
Is there anyone benefiting or profiting from the war on drugs staying this way?
Sure, the same, the police forces, the border security agents, but also the political elite that use this as a vehicle to maintain a stranglehold of fear over the middle and upper class white folks, and therefore enable themselves to stay in power.
Are there any programs, maybe in other countries, that might be able to be used as a model to solve the problem?
Well, it really depends on what you see as the problem. I mean, there are some countries that have less criminalization of what we would call recreational drugs, where the people have decided the state has no role to decide what somebody should or should not do with their body. Now, no state has that completely. Holland, the Netherlands has had some flexibility in terms of, or some relaxed rules in terms of some drugs, but even that's being clamped down on more and more based on pressures from internally and other countries putting pressure on them. So I can't point to any other examples that I know of.
So how did you decide that the current drug policies are not sensible, and what drug policies should there be to make them more sensible?
It is completely illogical that some drugs are patented and used by big pharma to make billions of dollars. Some drugs, like alcohol, are widely available, even though they do much larger social ills in terms of drug driving and like effects of alcoholism, and yet some other drugs are completely prohibited and banned. The state should have no role to say whether or not what a person can or cannot do with their body, and this moral outrage against some forms of drugs where they, against others that are completely acceptable is completely illogical and shouldn't be part of the Canadian system.
Any last words about the war on drugs?
I'd say drug prohibition does way more harm and costs way more money than education and harm reduction campaigns can do for some of the harder drugs, and for some of the so-called softer drugs. All it is doing is criminalizing a huge chunk of their otherwise regular folk. It makes absolutely zero sense to continue along the path that the Canadian state has been basically following the Americans.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
You know who I am. Snake. Dealing in weed, coke, crack, your choice. Take one hit and you'll do anything to cop more. Steal from your mama, lie, cheat on your homeboys. But hey, that's the price you pay when you deal with dudes like me. Now, some folks will tell you that I'm dealing in poison. But hey, do I look like the kind of guy that would do that to a kid like you? Yes!
This is your brain. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?
Don't just accept the rhetoric about the war on drugs. think critically, and challenge the beliefs of the ideological hegemony.